When it comes to storytelling, I've mentioned it before, less is more. Once I had a class that the professor told us we were gonna have to teach an entire lecture, like
the whole 2 hours.
I think I was maximum a sophomore in college and I was wow. He gave us 100 plus slides and told us, look, you have the textbook, you have the book, and you have the slides. I've given you all of the information you possibly could ever need. Your job is to filter it, is to find what is important and what is not. And that was a task in and of itself. But this process of figuring out what is important is what actually makes up a good story. It's like writing. Usually, whatever you write down on the first time, if you read it over and you analyze it, you can probably say the same thing with a lot less words. So don't forget this. Your job when you're giving a presentation is not to give all of the information in the world. Right? That kind of seems obvious, but we forget that sometimes. So what you have to do is to figure out what is truly needed and what isn't. Alright? When it comes to visuals, look at this. Now, look at this. Remember that you are your presentation? On the first one, people would have been reading that whole thing and would forget about you. Plus, if you're gonna have in your presentation everything that you're gonna say, then why are you presenting? I've seen a lot of students complain about teacher, professor presentations in which they are reading off the slide. They're like, you could have just sent that to me. Well, then why are you doing that then? Don't. Your presentation is you, not your slide. So again, don't have everything that you're going to say in a slide in written form. No, it's in your head. The PowerPoint slide is for bullet points. It's for a few words. Few words. Got it? And I mean it. When you have fewer words, people pay attention to you. And most of the time, that's what you want. You want them looking at you, not at your presentation slide, taking notes. Now that you understand that you're not going to put a lot of words, pictures, or whatever in the slides, comes the second portion, which is using drop down. When you're giving a presentation, you want to make sure that you move things slowly, gradually. Here's what I mean. If I'm going to talk about points 1 through 5, I want to make sure that I don't present them all at once. Here. Imagine you were just ready to start listening to a presentation and the person comes with that to you. You're like, okay, now I'm reading, there's a lot of things to understand. And you could turn them off. True. What you want to do instead is talk about bullet point number 1. Explain it. Then, next. Talk about bullet point number 2. Then, next. Talk about bullet point number 3. You see? And by the way, maybe you haven't realized this, but you actually appreciate when your professor does that too. When they give you a chunk of stuff all on your face and you're like, oh! No. You appreciate when they go, alright, let's move things along slowly so you can get what I'm saying. So why wouldn't you do that? There's a man called Guy Kawasaki, I hope I pronounced it right, that talks about this 10, 20, 30 rule. That means for a basic presentation that has 20 minutes long, you're gonna go no more than 10 slides, under 20 minutes, with at least 30-point font. Now, I like this rule, but I want you to focus on the ratio. He's talking about 10 slides for 20 minutes. You see, if you're taking 2 minutes per slide, that means you're actually going through them. You're explaining. You're trying to make it a conversation. You're not rushing through them. Some people do that too. They, on top of having a lot of stuff on the slide presentation like this, they're just reading through it, they're reading it fast, and you're just like, what is going on? So, make sure to keep this ratio in mind. Listen to me. Are you listening? Alright. Do not wait until the next slide shows up for you to know what you have to say. If you have to wait until the next slide to see what you have to say next, that just shows you haven't prepared. I'm sorry. If you have to go, bloop, next, and you're like, oh, okay, so no, you haven't prepared. You have to know the introduction for the next slide has to come from you as opposed to the other way around. You have to know what is going on throughout your presentation. You have to know it inside out, backwards, forwards. You have to know it. Because again, when you do that, of waiting for the next slide to be able to remember, it sounds like you didn't know your own presentation and you needed a reminder. Now, on a side note, I've mentioned how you're supposed to not have your presentation done the night before. I mean it. I'm not gonna make a specific video for this because if you're taking this seriously, this should be the basic. And this is coming from a student, from a fellow student. I'm dead serious. If you want to have a good presentation, you can't do it the night before. I'm sorry. If you did that in high school and you got lucky, alright, you may have some talent, but talent is not going to take you anywhere without practice. I'm dead freaking serious. You have to put in the work. Put an hour a day. Let's say today is Monday and you have a presentation next Monday. You haven't started it and you figured that you would need about 10 hours to do it. Here's what you do. Instead of cramming it the night before and trying to get it together and driving everyone crazy, you're gonna split that into 5 days. Yeah, 5, not 6 days, so until the night before, no, 5. So you're gonna go say 2 hours every day, and then the last day, you're only practicing. You're practicing it throughout, but the next day, you're only practicing, and you're taking a break also. You're making sure you're not going insane. Cool? That's it. So back to the story. Don't wait until you can see the next slide for you to know what you have to say.